Your 401k retirement account just lost 28% of its value, and you probably did not even blink. In fact, you might have logged into your portfolio this morning, seen the green numbers, and felt a small sense of accomplishment. The S&P 500 was up 18% last year. The tech giants are hitting record highs. On paper, you are richer than you were 3 years ago, but you are being lied to by a system that relies on your inability to understand the difference between price and value. Price is what you pay in pieces of green paper. Value is what those papers can actually buy you in the real world. Imagine you are measuring your height with a wooden ruler that shrinks by 10% every single year. When you stand against the wall, the ruler tells you that you are taller than you were last summer. You feel great. You think you are hitting a growth spurt in your 30s. But the reality is that you are exactly the same height. The measuring stick is just getting smaller. This is exactly what is happening to your wealth. The United States dollar is the shrinking ruler. According to global financial data from the last 12 months, the dollar has lost nearly 40% of its value when measured against gold. Gold is the only currency that does not have a central bank, a marketing department, or a printing press. It is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability. When you measure the stock market against real money, you realize the truth. You did not gain 18%. You are actually down 28% in real purchasing power. You are standing on a treadmill that is moving backward at high speed, and the people running the machine are telling you that you are winning a marathon. The people who run the system, the central bankers and the politicians, understand this perfectly. They have to. Their entire existence depends on keeping the public focused on the price, while they quietly siphon away the value. But something has changed in the last year. The very people who print the dollars are now the ones running for the exit. Central banks are currently dumping United States debt and hoarding physical gold at levels we have not seen since the 1960s. They are not doing this as an investment. They are doing it for survival. They know that the current financial system is entering what historians call a debt-death spiral. And by the end of this video, you will see why the year 2026 is the mathematical wall that no amount of money printing can jump over. Most people assume that as long as they pay their taxes and follow the law, their money in the bank is their property. This is a dangerous illusion. Money in a bank is not an asset. It is an unsecured loan you have given to a private corporation. You are a creditor. And in a crisis, you are the last person in line to get paid. But the risk is not just financial, it is political. We saw the first major crack in the foundation of Western trust, not in Russia, but in Canada. During the trucker protests in early 2022, the government did something that was previously unthinkable in a modern democracy. They froze the bank accounts of private citizens who had donated small amounts of money to a legal protest. These people were not terrorists. They had not been charged with a crime. They simply held a political opinion that the government did not like. In an instant, their ability to buy groceries, pay rent, or fuel their cars was deleted. This was the first light bulb moment for millions of investors. It proved that the modern banking system has been converted into a social credit system. If you do not comply, your wealth can be turned off with a single keystroke. This realization was the spark that began the global exodus from the dollar. If the government can weaponize your bank account because of your politics, then you do not own your money. You are just renting it from the state. This situation was amplified when the United States and its allies seized $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. Regardless of the geopolitical context, the financial signal was deafening. It told every country on Earth that holding United States dollars is the ultimate counterparty risk. If a nuclear-armed superpower can have its savings canceled overnight, what chance does a smaller nation have? This has triggered a massive movement toward de-dollarization. Countries like China, India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia are no longer interested in holding a currency that can be used as a leash. This total breakdown of trust is the primary driver behind the gold reset. Trust is the only thing that gives paper money value. When trust dies, gold is the only thing left standing. Central banks are moving their reserves out of the digital reach of Washington and into physical bars held in their own vaults. They are preparing for a world where money is no longer a neutral tool for trade, but a weapon for control. And they are making sure they have the only weapon that cannot be hacked, frozen, or deleted. If the world is rushing back to gold, we have to look at where that gold is supposed to be. On paper, the United States is the wealthiest nation in terms of gold reserves, with over 8,000 tons sitting in Fort Knox and other high-security vaults. But there is a massive problem with this official narrative. Fort Knox has not had a transparent, independent, and comprehensive audit in over 70 years. The last time the public got a real look inside the vaults was during the Eisenhower administration. Since then, the government has basically asked the world to trust them. But in a world where the debt is $38 trillion, trust is a very expensive commodity. Many analysts suspect that the gold in Fort Knox is no longer there in the way we think it is. It might have been leased out to bullion banks, used as collateral for complex currency swaps, or rehypothecated so many times that 10 different entities believe they own the same bar of gold. This leads us to the biggest trap for the average investor: paper gold. Most people think they are protected because they bought shares of a gold ETF, like GLD. They see the price of gold go up on their screen and they think their wealth is growing. But you need to read the fine print. When you buy an ETF, you do not own gold. You own a share in a trust that tracks the price of gold. In a systemic financial crisis, most of these funds have clauses that allow them to settle your account in cash, not in physical metal. Imagine a scenario where the dollar is losing 10% of its value every week. You try to close your gold account to get your metal, but the fund tells you they can only send you a check in dollars. By the time that check clears, those dollars might buy half as much as they did when you requested the withdrawal. You have achieved nothing. You have just traded one paper promise for another. This is why the smart money is moving toward physical possession. The central banks of China and Poland are not buying ETFs. They are taking delivery of heavy, physical bars. They understand that in a total reset, if you cannot touch it, you do not own it. Any asset that requires the internet to work, a bank to be open, or a government to be honest, is an asset that carries the risk of total loss. Gold is the only financial asset that has survived every empire, every war, and every currency collapse in human history. It doesn't need a CEO, it doesn't need an electricity grid, and it doesn't need your permission. Let us look at the cold, hard math of why 2026 is the year the game changes. The United States government is currently $38 trillion in debt. To most people, that is just a big number that doesn't mean anything. But the real danger isn't the total debt, it is the interest on that debt. For the last 2 decades, the United States enjoyed an era of near zero interest rates. The government could borrow trillions of dollars for almost nothing. But that era is officially dead. Interest rates have spiked, and the bill is coming due. In the next 18 months, over $9 trillion of United States government debt will mature. This means the government has to pay back the people who lent them money. The problem is that the government does not have $9 trillion. They spent it long ago. So, to pay back the old debt, they have to issue new debt. This is called refinancing. Think of it like a person who has a massive credit card balance. For years, they had a 0% interest rate. They could handle the payments. But now, that teaser rate has expired, and the bank is charging them 20%. Their monthly payment has just tripled. The United States is currently spending $1.2 trillion a year just on interest payments. That is more than the entire defense budget. By 2026, as that $9 trillion in debt is refinanced at these higher rates, the interest payments could consume nearly 50% of all tax revenue. This is what economists call the point of no return. When your interest payments become your largest expense, you are no longer a functioning economy. You are a debt management system. The government only has 3 ways out of this trap. They could cut spending, but that would mean stopping Social Security and Medicare, which would lead to a revolution. They could raise taxes, but that would crash the economy and lower tax revenue even further. Or, they could print the money. They will choose to print the money. They will print trillions of dollars to pay the interest, which will dilute the value of every dollar already in circulation. This is the silent robbery. They aren't going to take the money out of your bank account. They are just going to make the money in your bank account worth less. This is why gold is being repriced. The market is realizing that the government is trapped, and the only way out is to burn the currency to save the state. We have moved past the era of trade wars. We are now in the era of capital wars. This is a global struggle to define what money will be for the next century. The United States has used the dollar as a tool of hegemony since 1944, but that monopoly is being challenged for the first time. The BRICS nations, which now represent a larger share of global GDP than the G7, are tired of being dependent on a dollar that is being printed into oblivion. They are actively building an alternative financial infrastructure. The most significant development is the proposed new currency, called the unit. The unit is designed to be the exact opposite of the dollar. While the dollar is backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of a government with $38 trillion in debt, the unit is proposed to be backed 40% by physical gold. It is a return to sound money. If the unit is adopted for international trade, even by a small group of nations, the demand for United States dollars will collapse. For decades, the United States has been able to export its inflation. We print dollars, and other countries give us their oil, their electronics, and their labor in exchange for those dollars. They then hold those dollars in their central banks. But if they stop wanting the dollar, those trillions of dollars will come flooding back to American shores. This would cause a domestic price explosion that would make the last 3 years look like a golden era of stability. This is why the central banks of the world are in a gold fever. They are preparing for a multipolar world. They are building a system where they can trade with each other without the permission of the Western banking system. When you see the world's largest economies moving their wealth into gold, they are telling you that the era of the paper dollar is coming to an end. We are moving toward a world of real assets and hard commodities. The reset is not something that might happen. It is something that is already being built in the shadows. So, what do you do if you are not a billionaire or a central banker? What if you are a 20-year-old with a few $100s, or a retiree who is terrified of losing everything? The first step is to change your mindset. You must stop thinking in terms of how many dollars you have and start thinking in terms of what percentage of your wealth is in real assets. If you have a small amount of capital, you need to look at silver. Gold gets all the headlines, but silver is the sleeping giant of this reset. Silver is currently 80 times cheaper than gold, which is a historical anomaly. Silver is also an industrial necessity. You cannot build a modern world, a green energy grid, or a high-tech weapon without it. While central banks hoard gold, silver is being used up by industry. It is the only asset that is still 50% below its all-time high from 40 years ago. For the average person, silver is the most affordable way to exit the paper system. Second, you must avoid consumer debt, like your life depends on it. In a debt-death spiral, interest rates stay high, and credit becomes a trap. The people who will survive the reset are those who own their homes, their cars, and their tools. If you owe the bank money, the bank owns you. In a reset, the bank will not be your friend. Third, you must invest in yourself. In a world of falling currencies, your skills are the only thing that cannot be inflated away. If you are a plumber, an electrician, a developer, or a surgeon, you have a skill that society needs. You will always be able to trade your labor for food and shelter, regardless of whether the currency is called the dollar, the unit, or a gold coin. The best insurance policy is your own utility to the world. Finally, do not wait for the official announcement. The government will tell you everything is fine until the very second they close the banks. They will tell you that the new digital currency is for your convenience when it is actually for your surveillance. They will tell you that the stock market is at record highs, while your ability to buy a house vanishes. The signs are everywhere. The debt is unsustainable. The interest is overwhelming. The world is moving to gold. The year 2026 is the deadline that math has set for the American economy. You can choose to be a victim of this reset, or you can choose to be a participant in the new system. The era of easy money and paper promises is over. We are returning to a world of reality, a world where things that are real have value, and things that are printed have none. Stay vigilant, stay educated, and most importantly, stay grounded in things you can touch. The reset is ahead, and only those who prepared in the silence will thrive in the noise. The math does not lie, and the math says the day of reckoning is closer than you think.